Thank you for joining me, everybody. My guest today is David Sliman at Sales Proformance Consulting. So David and he invited me onto his podcast. I am returning the favor, but we had such a good conversation. I kind of want to just keep it going. And I feel bad too sometimes, David, when I'm on a podcast and I feel like I wanted to ask you questions because I know you've got an interesting background and you've had a lot of experience and things I can learn from. And I don't get to do it when I'm your guest. I'm supposed to be talking. So we're returning the favor / I'm digging in and selfishly want to learn. David, introduce yourself a little more formally, I guess. And I've got some questions to kick us off after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, first off, thanks for having me here. We had a fantastic conversation on my podcast. I'm actually excited to have that one come on, wait for the edits on that, but it was a lot of fun. And I'm like, well, heck, man, if you're doing one too, you got to have me on this show for sure. Right. So listen, I have a big background. I've done 3 startups, all in the B2B space. So in those startups that I've done, I've developed sales teams and sales organizations in the B2B space. So I always say I'm a sales professional at heart. I was just lucky enough to be mentored by some great people along the way to learn how to start, build, and operate businesses. And more importantly, help people be successful in organizations. And that's why I love doing the consulting work now, is to help organizations grow, help people grow. That's where I'm at in my career, is to really serve and give back. Whether it's running an organization, whether it's organizational alignment, whether it's helping a sales team be more successful and execute better, or have their leaders within who are leading the charge for the teams be better at coaching and managing their teams to get, the most out of them from a professional level. So that's what I do right now, and I really enjoy it.
Cool. Where do you see most entrepreneurs falling short when it comes to leading sales teams? I'll stop there. I have thoughts because I have my own struggles with this. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
You have to be really clear on what the expectations are, right? And gosh, there's so many, right? Every company's a little bit different. But when I go in and assess a sales organization, the first thing that I like to look at are really this thing that I call the power statement, okay? It's one of those things. It's not a value proposition. It's not a pitch. But when you speak with someone for the first time about what you do with your organization, are you speaking the language of your prospects? And most of the time, companies are not. They really want to say, hey, here's what I do. We're great. We do this. We've been in business for so long, and we do this, and we've impacted businesses, and we do this. And it's not about that. What you really have to understand, I think, the first thing you have to understand as an entrepreneur building a sales organization, especially in the B2B space, but is understand your targets. Okay, when you identify the right targets and you understand their business, now you can start speaking their language. And when I put together this power statement, it's really built around. It's a little more deeper than this, but the framework is this. Okay, what challenges do you help with for your prospect? How do you do it? And what makes you different? And if you can engage in that way, if you can lead off by saying, listen, companies turn to me because of X, Y, Z, and Z, and they go, oh, you know what? I have that. When you start speaking their language, you earn the right for the opportunity for an appointment or a presentation or whatever that may entail as far as your sales process. So that's always one of the first things I look at is what's the outreach like? What's the dialogue? And I use that word dialogue. I don't use scripts. Scripts is not a word that I use in my vocabulary or training, but it's more around the dialogue. What kind of conversation are you going to have with a prospect to make them really feel comfortable? One, that you know what you're talking about, and 2, that you're not like every other 20 people that walk through the door prior to you, and you're not going to be like every 20 people walking out of or into the door after you. It starts from the top too, because you might have a CEO or a business owner who has an idea of what they think the organizational alignment is, and the people in the front who are leading the charge don't. And when you do this exercise, it's amazing how this aligns with the whole organization. And it starts bleeding into your marketing. It starts bleeding into your messaging. It starts bleeding into your email messaging. I mean, all that kind of stuff. So that's all zipping from there.
No, this is great, David. So it just reminds me of something I accidentally learned the hard way, like we learn most of our lessons. I learned the hard way going into, like, starting the agency and becoming a salesperson. And the day zero is like the way that I needed to talk about problems and challenges for my tiny little startup that was, on a sales call where I'm on a sales call directly with a founder versus pretty large company where I'm talking to a middle manager in marketing or something. Totally different. And I did not really intuit that. I assumed everybody cares about growing the business. And, I spoke to founders like I speak to a founder, like I'm a founder, I get it. And I talked to a middle manager and they're like, I don't, like, what does that mean? That's so abstract, that idea of growing a business to some middle manager at a corporate, giant corporate. And so I realized, you got to speak to their problems. Like, what's their tactical problem that they care about day to day, not just what truly is the big goal of sales and marketing is grow the business, but that's not really what a middle manager in marketing cares about. It sounds silly and obvious, but it really is true.
Yeah, and I think too, you make a really good point, because especially in a much larger sale like a SaaS or something of that nature, you're going to go through these steps. You're going to have your champion, right? You're going to have your economic buyer. You're going to have the decision maker, and sometimes those can be intermingled. But if you're speaking to a champion that doesn't really make the final decision, they may have different challenges, like you just said, than the CEO who says, "Listen, I want the bottom line to grow. I want this, I want the numbers to go up." All right, if we're going to do that, well, my champion here has probably a whole list of challenges. So yeah, it's a really good point you bring up.
But yeah, again, that kind of reinforces what you're saying about that. Learn the language of your customer and learn who that target customer is really well. And, again, early on, we didn't have really well-defined personas, and we're always trying new ones. And so, just all the classic things that everybody does early. We'll get back into some more sales stuff in a minute. I kind of want to go back because I want to hear a little more about your history in entrepreneurship, because it's been you've like you said, you've done some startups, you've done some other stuff. You went going all the way back. You started with a franchise. I'm always curious about that business model. Tell me about the franchise you were in on and how that went, what your experience was like, because I think you did it a fairly long time.
Yeah. My first opportunity in business was to be a franchise in the marketing and advertising space of direct mail brand. Back then, I'm dating myself now, but it was 1999. I was young when I had an opportunity to do this. And it was more print, direct mail. I don't even think they were doing postcards at that point. But anyway, the company evolved. But I love the company. They're still around today. And I love the product because it was so unique. Their flagship product is so unique because what it does is they target new residents, people who just move into the community. They get these businesses in front of them and exclusively, and they drive them to their door rather than competitors are. So it was a great model. And I was living in Phoenix at the time. People were moving into Arizona, like Phoenix, Arizona, like crazy back then. So it was just a really great model and a great structure. And it was a young franchise at that point. So I had a great opportunity then because the CEO and I, he was one of my mentors, I was able to bounce things off of him. We would test things. So I was in a really unique spot. But the key was that, like anything, and any entrepreneur out there, you have to put in the work. Okay. And I talk about this a lot, especially when I do keynote speaking and training events. But, I always have this graph, right? You have skills and then you have knowledge on the bottom. Okay. And then there's this line in the middle. And the line in the middle is work ethic, because you're going to be able to learn skills. You're going to be able to learn out. When I started when I was 24 in this business, I didn't have any experience in marketing or advertising. I didn't have any sales skills. I didn't have any knowledge about marketing. But what I did is I focused every day on getting better and learning. So for me, it was a great thing having my first business in the franchise space, because there was a framework for me, right? The logo was done. They had branding material. They had a decent sales training at that time. So it got me off the ground. And obviously the company wasn't that big, and I got to work with the CEO a lot. So it was a great mentorship. So I'm not saying that I couldn't have done it or figured it out, but I probably would have taken a lot of detours. And I thought a franchise for anybody out there, listen, I'm not selling a franchise or anything, but what I'm saying is a franchise model was a good start for me in my early education as a business owner. And then I really evolved as an entrepreneur, even halfway through of being involved with that company. And then I sold it, and then I did, 3 startups from that point on.
Yeah, I mean, franchises are they're so interesting because like they feel like entrepreneurship light in a way, and sometimes they can be a bad deal, to be honest. I mean, again, this one sounds like a good one, but sometimes they can be kind of a ripoff for the entrepreneur. But that said, I've met people who do it as a career. They run franchises and they're very good at it, and they are good at picking the right ones in the right places and taking that level of risk. And it always makes me like, it's just fascinating because it's not an angle I've pursued. So I just find it fascinating for that reason. I think to a broader point here, and this is something I often see with entrepreneurs, is like, it's really, there's no right and wrong way to build a company. It's about building the confidence that you can do it. And for some people, they need to go work for 10 years. I mean, that was my story. I had to work for 10 years as a first employee at a couple of places before I had the confidence to. You had to do a franchise for a while to build the confidence to do it. Like at the end of the day, there's some skills, there's some knowledge, absolutely. But really, it's about you just having the chutzpah to go grab it because it's there. You could have done it 5 years earlier, 10 years earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, and I told them, it's never going to be perfect. If you think that the stars are going to align, the seas are going to part, and there's going to be this road that says, here's your business, open it, it's not going to happen. There's always going to be some time, some personal thing. There's always going to be something out there that's not going to make it the right time. And it's not for everybody. I'm not, Karl, that's the other thing too. It's not for everybody. But what I do say is if you feel like you have that entrepreneur stuff where you're working for an organization and you're really intrigued by the way it's growing and you want more, I really encourage you to consider doing something on your own. And when I started even that franchise, I had $1,000 in the bank and my bills paid for 30 days, and I had to make money, right? Like I had to do it. I truly believe though in the product, and like that's the other thing that I think is important, especially for an entrepreneur building a business. You almost have to take the customer experience first and then work backwards, right? And I think a lot of times, conceptually, and again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if you know that you've got something out there or you've got an idea that can help a business or even a person or whatever you're looking at, you got to start with the end user experience first to make sure. But from there, it's like, you'll figure the road. Listen, you're going to run into some detours. It's going to happen, but you're going to have some wins. You'll figure out the roadmap. And your roadmap's different than mine. Mine was different than yours. There's some commonality in things that we've probably come across, but there's no book on that. You can't find, I mean, there's books on this, but there's no class that you can go into and say, hey, yeah, this is what you should do.
That kind of goes back to that, I've talked to for this show and other reasons, hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs over the last 10 years. I'm sure you have too. And there's no two stories that are alike. There's certainly some common traits you tend to see. There's some things that pop up over and over again, but there's no like one formula. I always think this too with books. You can read 1,000 books and they're all going to tell you this is the way I did it, or you could do it. And it's like, they're all right, unfortunately, which is what's so hard about it. And I think, honestly, one of the things that I struggled with most as an early entrepreneur was the open-endedness of it. The fact that there was no boss up the chain anymore to say, in absolute terms, which way do we go? Like there was nobody there. It's just me. And you think that's going to that makes life easier. It doesn't. Like I just tell you, like humans are not inherently wired to be that independent necessarily. We like constraints. We like having some kind of limitations in like direction because that sort of gives us some kind of security or something. And anyway, so I struggled with that. I think probably a lot of entrepreneurs did. It sounds like for you, the franchise was kind of a way to overcome that, because it's like, here's your guardrails, here's the way to do it, and you get to follow that path for a bit first, right?
Yeah, you get to follow a little bit of a path, and you get like, for example, in that case, what was happening was the production was taken out of the way, right? Like I wasn't worried about pushing out production. I wasn't working about paying postage on my stuff. I would send design work in, but I didn't have to have the design. Like they did all the nuts and bolts in that. But, the day-to-day, it was really an opportunity for me to learn how to sell in the beginning too. And then once I identified I could do that, then it was about scaling the business. And I read, again, this is a book that comes up a lot, and it's timeless, but the E-Myth. Like that was a book that really changed my thinking about running the business. Um, and I probably read the original E-Myth. I know there's an E-Myth revisited now, but realistically, if you're in business or you're thinking about getting into business or you're doing something, just read that book because it was so powerful for me. Because in the first year or two, I'm sure I was just working in the business versus working on the business. And when I started working on the business, that's where I brought on sales professionals and I got an office and a graphics team. I really started, scaling it to grow. And that was a big difference. Yeah.
I love the E-Myth. I think we probably talked about that on your show too, but it's one of those books I drop every time somebody asks about just scaling, growing and thinking about systems. It really, for me, it unlocked this idea that you don't have to be a venture funded startup that's going to scale to tens of millions of dollars to hire people who specialize in certain parts of the business and run it. The only model I had for small business was my dad, who just kind of owned a small business where he did everything with his friends. It was like three guys owned an antique store together. It was never going to be he was not scaling anything. It was not his goal. And I just thought that's what you had to do. And then I realized now that there's ways to scale it without, raising bunches of money or building technology necessarily. Like all these things might help, but they're not the only way. And so I love the E-Myth. Kind of going to your startup experience. Tell me more about that. Like you did a couple startups. What were those like? Like, what was your role? And give me some more background there.
Yeah. Well, after being involved in a franchise for, 10 plus years, I thought, well, heck, how hard can it be to start my own business? And how hard can it be? Not only that, down the road, I started a franchise business. I mean, I know everything about franchising now because I was a franchisee.
You did one. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. No, that was not the case. You don't want to talk about leveling up and like getting an education on a startup. So, but it did give me a foundational element, right? I'm not going to lie. I mean, to have the structure of an accounting team and a graphics team, because the first startup that I did was in the marketing and advertising space, where it was digital marketing and it was postcard marketing. It was a magazine. And I knew that if I could grow it in a great market like Phoenix and really get it to grow progressively, that the plan was to scale it across the country and do that through franchising. So the first step was for me to really build that magazine model, really local marketing solutions for all small businesses. And then then I got, I had the bright idea that I didn't want to do some out of the box software, and I was going to do custom software. And
of course, yeah.
Looking back on that one, I might have changed my path on that actually, because there was a lot of late nights and testing and dollars spent with custom software. So, but realistically, I knew that I started with the end user. I said, if we have a really good product and products for our small business clients and medium-sized business clients and large business clients, that I could figure everything out, right? So I remember I created this demo of a magazine. I mean, they weren't even real ads. Like they were fake ads. And I would go out and I would present and I would start writing deals. And I'm like, oh, this is great. So then I put I was working on my sales process as well. And I was refining it. And because I knew I was documenting everything, right? Because I knew that I was going to bring on a sales team eventually, have a sales manager. We were going to have this huge market in Phoenix and then we were going to have franchisees and I need to train. So I'm going into all this, but I say document what you're doing, because once you do that, that will set you up for that'll give you some really good foundation to build and scale it. And then implemented in the first year, I think we were managing everything on a spreadsheet. And then I created some software programs, and then we got more in depth in our accounting programs. And you just keep leveling up over time. But I didn't have a lot, I think I invested originally about $30,000 to start, just to get me up and going. And a lot of it was very just blood, sweat equity, blood, sweat, and tears. So that was really the path. But again, I say this, I started with the end user. I really did.
Yeah, I love that. And I was going to kind of double down on that point that you tackled a problem that I would call a ever-present, unsolvable problem. And what I mean is, like, small businesses in a local area will always need to reach the people who live in that local area, and they're never 100% happy with their reach into that area. I've never met a small business owner who's like, yeah, we have 100% penetration into this neighborhood or this city. Like, no, it doesn't exist. Like, it's because people are complicated, and patterns change, their habits change, the way that people move constantly. Like, it is an ever-present problem. And what's cool about that is, like, there's 1,000 ways to solve it. None of them are right and wrong. And so any entrepreneur with a little bit of, like, customer understanding, who can kind of go to these people and speak with empathy to them, can sell something. Like, it's not a rocket science type business. And I don't mean to demean it by any means, David. Like, I think it's a genius business, but it's not one of those ones that requires this, like, creative leap of, like, oh, we got to go invent the next technology just to do it. Like, you could go on day zero and sell stuff that was a fake magazine, which is perfect. Like, that's what you want.
Totally. Yeah. You want something that you can get out there and listen. And there's places for, it's just interesting, especially here, they call this area out here called the Silicon Slopes out here in Park City, like just south of us here. And it's all these tech startups and stuff, and having a few conversations, and these guys are valuing their company at like 4 or 5 million, and they don't have any sales. Like,
right.
I'm like blown away. I mean, I guess there's a place for everything, right? But I'm like, it blows me away, Karl.
Right. Yeah. We're simple people, David. We don't understand. Yeah, I'm with you.
I don't get it. And I know, again, I don't understand all the intricacies of that deal, but it's amazing to me. And we know the startup world, the percentages that make it, all that stuff. And I'm not taking anything away. I encourage this type of, aggressive belief, and you've got to have it, man. You've got to have the grit. You've got to have the belief. And sometimes it is saying, hey, my company's worth $4 million to move it to the next level. But it is a little amazing to me, of how, you've got to be able to get the word out. You've got to have a process. That's what I love doing, is looking at companies, their execution plan, how they present their product to their prospects, their targets, which we talked about earlier, which are a big one, speaking the language, and then giving a real structured, I would say structured, but a controlled presentation, right? There's a framework you have to always have control when you're presenting a product. And the more research you do, and the more you understand your prospect and your discovery step, the better you have to build value in your presentation. So that's a whole nother probably topic we could talk about down the road, but yeah, I'm big into that.
You bring up a good point, and this is something that a lot of agency owners struggle with, kind of going back to our typical listener here, and my experience is that as an agency owner, we often are selling somewhat creative, open-ended services. And so we're proposing something new to each client. And so that what I hear from a lot of agency owners is we can't really put our services in a box, or we don't want to, define them too tightly, because what if somebody comes in and wants something different? How do you push back on that? Like, what's your response there? What does your gut tell you is the right way to handle that objection?
Well, I think the bigger thing is the credibility. There's a step in my presentation, it's called validation. So I look at it, giving a great presentation really is 5 steps, okay? The first step is the discovery step, where you really understand, we know this, you try to understand the challenges of the business, what they're up against. In your mind, you're kind of almost developing the strengths of your presentation based on the answers they're giving you, because you want to help, and you're really just trying to identify where you can help. That's the biggest thing, and an understanding of the business. The second step for me is to just do a demo of the product. Okay, I'm going to tie some things together based on that discovery step of where I think we can fill some gaps for them. But more importantly, it's to explain everything that we do, and not being biased or their banker, or saying, listen, I'm not going to show you this because I don't think it's going to help. I'm going to show it anyway, right? Like, I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to show everything that we do, because that may spark another interest of some sort. And then next, the third step is differentiators. What really makes your company? Because most of the time, if they're looking at you, they're probably looking at somebody else. Okay.
Yeah. You fit in a category if it's especially B2B sales. Yeah.
Right. You get thrown in a box, right? So one of the big steps in a presentation is how you're different, really what separates you from other programs out there. And you better have something. I mean, you better find something that makes you different. And then the fourth step is the validation. Okay. And that's where kind of this answers your question. Like, here are some of the companies I've worked with where I've made an impact of X, Y, and Z by using our product or taking this, whatever it might be. But you have to have some validators. And there's so many easy ways these days to get validators. I mean, we have these video things on our phone. I mean, I really believe validators these days are videos. Sometimes they're case studies. But I think the validators are a really big point to answer your question where, listen, what happens is this, and I've seen it and I've lived it. You start trying to become everything to everybody, and you start making all these adjustments. And what ends up happening is you get the deal done, but you've made so many adjustments at this point that there's no margin in it. You've spent time, you've spent money, you've put effort into creating this, and it's only going to work for that business. So maybe they're not the right fit, right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to make a 2% margin on something that you modified, where if you found a business listen, we got a program, this is why it's going to work for you, I'm going to show you, you're going to make a 20% margin. So is it really worth it?
It's totally this short-term versus long-term thinking, in my opinion. And what I mean, it's like, here's a scenario that comes in often. Let's say I run a social media management agency. We do LinkedIn management for professionals or whatever for companies. Okay, great. And then a company is like, hey, you guys are great with my social media and LinkedIn. Could you manage my YouTube channel too? And we're like, well, I don't know. I've never done a YouTube channel, but I could figure it out. How hard could it be, right? Now, as an owner, it's probably on me to go figure it out, because chances are nobody else in my team is that entrepreneurial. They're going to go say, yeah, I could do this, when they've never done it, right? So I either have to go do it or hire it out to somebody. And if it's one client, one time that asks for this, I have to waste so many cycles just figuring that out, and it's a non-repeatable process. Huge waste of my time. And you're right, goes down to immediately my margin drops to 2%, or I am spending all my time on this thing. Now, the flip side is, if you are intentional about it and you think this is an area we could expand into, right? I mean, sure, you're going the same place. It's like, sure, test it out once, say yes, but be very intentional about the guardrails you set around it. Don't just say yes to every single request. We've done this a couple times in the last 2 years, and one attempt failed and one attempt went really well. So one attempt was we do content writing, and we were like, we'll also do executive ghostwriting. I tried to offer that as a service. I said yes to a couple people. We went through it a couple times. Brutal. It was so hard. Could not figure it out. Couldn't make money on it. Couldn't find writers for it. And no clients were happy. Just wasted time, wasted money, whatever. But we only did it twice, and whatever. You got to do that. The next thing we did was, a year later, we said, okay, let's make one more intentional stab, and we did video content. Never done video content, but clients keep asking for it. Let's give it a shot. It went super well. Immediate from the get-go, it was people were super jazzed. We could keep increasing prices on it, and people kept saying yes. So we're like, that's a good sign. So anyway, long story short is intentionally running tests is one thing, and put that in a category that is good, but saying yes to everything is bad. And you have to be very careful, because it's so freaking tempting when people want to throw money at you.
Yes, it's so true, man. Believe me. I mean, we all lived it, right? I mean, they're good. Pull up 5 different scenarios on that where it sometimes even lost money and going, oh man, this was not a good one. But realistically, yeah, I mean, I think that you use the best word, and you just have to be intentional, and you've got to be more proactive than reactive when you take something on new, knowing that, hey, listen, I want to fail fast. And if it does work, I want to be able to put it together in a way that I can duplicate it.
Yep. Great. So you also mentioned on our last call that you have acquired companies or a company before. Tell me about that. Where did that fit in your journey?
I didn't acquire a company. I was acquired. Actually, my company was acquired in 2020.
Oh, okay. So you've been on the other side. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Let's talk about that then.
So the first company I sold was my franchise. I mean, that was a small sale, right? It was pretty cut and dry. And then, through the years, I developed the marketing advertising business, that one. And then I developed a franchise business on top of that. And then I did a logistics business on top of that. So because we were pushing out 2.5, 3 million magazines a month. So I had to almost develop a logistics company to make sure that, we were getting the most efficiencies in our shipping. I mean, there was a whole different thing, but I learned a lot. Again, I learned a ton going through this. So in about 2020, COVID hits, and we were very, in the word, intentional about plowing through that. We were going to find a way to keep going. We knew it was going to be a short-term deal when everything shut down, but we were prepping before everybody. We were strategically planning to get our franchises up and going quicker than anybody. We had a huge market in Arizona that we were planning. I mean, we didn't miss a beat. We didn't miss a mailing. And actually, I probably lost some money in that mailing too when we put it out. But I will tell you this, we plowed through it in our hockey stick by, I would say, May. It went from like May, June, July, August. We were having record months. It was unbelievable.
What was that? Because people wanted to get local information and get themselves out to people. Yeah.
Yeah. I think at that time, a lot of people were in their homes, and we were getting into homes with our marketing. And then we were targeting digitally. We would be able to geo-target areas. And then obviously we had the postcard mailings, which are very, very, you can really dial in your neighborhoods and specifically get. So there was a need for it, but we also plowed through. I mean, we really conditioned ourselves and educated our clients because they needed to get customers back. But it was it was so funky. It was such a funky time, right? I mean, we all remember that. So I'm not going to go too far into that. So anyway, one of the larger marketing advertising companies throughout the country reached out to me, and they said, "Hey, you got a pretty good market presence in Arizona. We'd like to do some cross sales in with you because we don't have a market there." And I said, "Great." So anyway, long and the short of it was that worked out for a little while. And then they said, "Hey, we looked at where you're located. We'd like to acquire you." There was like a whole, man, I want to say 120 days of due diligence. Okay. Because we're going to incorporate the 3 companies in. So we had files. I mean, I had to find everything, every contract, every, P&L for the last 3 years. So, and there was there were countless meetings going back and forth about questions, because here you got a company that looks to acquire you. They know you from the outside in, but once you get under the hood, and they were smart guys, especially the guy who was the CEO. He had a very CFO type background, but so they really got it on what we were doing. And obviously they had marketing companies as well, so they were going to incorporate that. And anyway, long and the short of it was the process leading up to it was a lot of every day, like your mind's changing. Like one day you're like, "Oh, man, it's a slam dunk." And then the next day you're like, "Man, I don't know if this is this going to go through?" And then you're like, "Am I doing the right thing?" Because we're like growing again. But what's your gut telling you? And then you're thinking about, how's the market going to respond in another 6 months or a year? Like, you're calculating all this. And I have to admit, okay, and going through this, and I say this with humility, I really do. I was so focused on what they were saying, the story they were portraying, and really the excitement of getting this deal done, that I didn't think forward on the people who were in the organization as much. The franchisees, the team members who I were close to in the market, like I thought about them. I knew that was a win for them. The employees, I thought it was going to be solid, but I didn't estimate how much it was going to affect the franchisees, because I was their leader. I had brought them on. I had trained them. I had coached them for their business, and then boom, the company's going to be sold to these guys we don't know. And I don't think they did a good job on their side, and I don't think I did a good job on my side. And I take that on. I still, carry that a little bit, but it was a learning thing, right? I would do different now down the road. So I learned a lot from that situation, and I stayed on with that company through the transition for about 2 years. And they were they were good to me to a certain extent, but I'd been working for myself since I was 24. So
Yeah. It's tough to go back to that.
yeah. And the CEO and we just,
Yeah.
I'll call it what it is. And I don't care if he's listening or not. I mean, him and I just bang heads. I mean, it was just
A
crazy.
restaurant can only have one head chef, right? There's
Yeah.
kind of, it's really tough. I think every entrepreneur I've talked to who's sold a business has had that same struggle with going back to being an employee. It's not that they're a bad employee or they don't care. It's just that it's mentally very hard to make that switch because there's going to be a decision you would make differently, or there's going to be a market you would go after that the your boss won't now do, and just so many things. And you're going to see these opportunities like, and I think once you've built the confidence to do it on your own, it's so hard to just say, well, I'll just go work for somebody else, for long. I mean, obviously short times we can all do it. But anyway, you said like one of the things that was hard was decide, like sticking with it through the whole process. Like what kind of got you through that or made you decide like, yes, this is what I want to do. I really want to sell it, like versus just keep it and keep running it.
I'm going to tell you that I really, in my heart, thought it was the best move for the organization. Like I felt like I carried the flag. I brought it to the next level, and the company that was buying my company had like 6 different marketing companies within them. They had one of the larger direct mail companies in the country. I saw a lot of synergy. So in my heart of hearts, I really felt like this was the best move for the growth for the organization. Now, I say this in the light of, again, I would have made, looking back, I mean, everybody can be a Monday morning quarterback. And I heard them on what they wanted to do long term, or what they want to do in the short term and the long term. They weren't detailed. They were kind of just like bullet points of what they wanted to do. If I would have rewound it, I would have dug more into that, because from a conceptual standpoint, it sounded great. But from an execution standpoint, I don't think they really had that together. And it took longer for them. But yeah, I think for me, in my heart of hearts, I really felt it was great to have a product that was going to be bought by one of the larger direct mail companies in the country and put some real firepower behind it. Because, I mean, we were, I think at the time, maybe an $8 million company or something like that at that point. So, to bring in a much larger company, have firepower, that was the intention on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's again, like I could totally see that. And I've seen plenty of stories like this where, the bigger organization that swallows you up, like they have good intentions, and maybe they again, I typically operate with people assuming that they're honest and they have good intentions. It's just that you're right, the ball can get dropped anywhere along the way, or miscommunicated, or priorities can change. And what's hard too, this comes up a lot, is like when you're the much smaller organization and the bigger organization eats you up, it's hard for them to really prioritize your tiny amount of revenue when they've got this big hunk over here that's really way more impactful to their bottom line. It's not that they don't care at all. It's just that, like, 80-20 principle. They're going to pay attention to where they get their cash from. So anyway, one thing you mentioned, David, that I always like to talk to people about who are willing to is mentorship. And, both being mentored and mentoring other people, I think both are really rewarding in their own ways. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective, like, have you had a lot of mentors in your journey as an entrepreneur, or just a couple? How have you, those relationships shifted over time? Tell me more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it earlier when I got involved in that franchise business. The CEO was a mentor of mine across the board. And I had another mentor. I mean, I will tell you this, that I look back at the times where my organizations or my companies grew. And the times that they grew is when I brought in a consultant or a mentor, someone to look outside in versus inside out. Because what happens when you're running these organizations, one, you're really close to it, and your heart's in it, your blood, sweat, and tears are in it. And sometimes when you're in the weeds, you just can't see everything. And when you bring in a mentor, one who's done it, two who can give you some, obviously, I'm big on mentors, but they got to have experience, right? And also, when I have a mentor, I want to try to bring something to the table. What can I do for them, right? I just don't want it to be a one-way street, whether it's just help them with, I don't know what it might be, but I always try to understand if there's an opportunity, because I almost feel bad. Like, just making it a one-way street. I want to be able to give back somehow, some way. But yeah, bringing in a mentor is extremely important. Has been pivotal for me in my career. And when I look back on that, those were the years where I really made some growth, not only from a nominal standpoint, but from conceptual standpoint, how to run a business just conceptually. So yeah, I attribute all my successes through the years through leveling up with those mentors. So that's first and foremost. Secondly, where flip that, where I'm at in my career right now, I'm lucky enough that I have the freedom to consult and work with organizations, and it really is mentoring. That's what it is. I mean, it's for me to go outside in, and I love helping. And I promise you this: if you show me any successful person out there, they've had somebody help them along the way. And the people who are successful really are the ones who want to help. In most cases, want to help the most. And I just love to be able to help and take the knowledge and stuff that, I either paid for along the way from again, nominal standpoint and a conceptual standpoint, paid for, and try to really pay that forward, because a lot of professionals help me. So I'm a true believer in giving back. I mean, one of my mantras is, to be able to help people personally and professionally. And like, that's one of the things that go through my mind each day. And I pray on that stuff. So I ask for the power to do that the best of my ability, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Something you said there struck me, which is having that mentor kind of change your way of thinking so that you could operate a bigger business. That's something I've noticed is it's not just that. Here's what I think. I used to think a mentor was going to give me the tactics that were going to get me from this A to B, right? But it's really a mindset shift. It's like the way that a business owner thinks running $100 million business is just very different from little guys like me. Like they just think about it at a different level. And it's hard for me to describe it because I'm not there yet. I haven't fully absorbed that. But what I find is surrounding myself with people like that or getting mentors who are in that bucket, they start to like make me think that way. And I start to not care about the little things. And I think maybe that's one of the biggest differences is like when you're really small, you get caught up in every single complaining client, every single employee problem that might, hurt you. And it is important to pay attention to that stuff in the early days. But at some point, you have to start separating and building this gulf between you and those little issues and think really big and really strategic and be up in the clouds a bit. And I think the bigger the company, the more people those people have showed me that that's the way you have to think. It's just hard to separate, like you said.
Yeah. It's like that leveling up, right? I mean, just from starting a franchise in 1999, me being the person doing all the accounting, the billing, the picking up checks and all that, to 2020, we have an $8 million business and employees and franchisees and 100 people involved. It's just, you'll get caught up in the wheel, and you will not grow if you can't really separate yourself from that. And it's not something where you just say one day, hey, I'm never going to respond to a client again. I mean, you have to gradually move yourself into that and identify it. And that's, if there's anything that I can say, there's two things that I would recommend. And it kind of goes back to the mentorship. The first thing is always be open to learn. Okay. Especially with mentors, you're never going to know it all. I don't know it all right now. Like there's some people won't, come to me and say, well, I need this fixed. And I said, listen, here's how I start out with a lot of my trainings. And I'll say this, I go, stuff I'm going to say here is going to be taken three ways. One, hey, you know what? I heard that before. I used to do that. I'm going to do it now. Two, no way in heck, Dave. That's not my style. I am not going to do that. That is not what I'm going to do. And then three, you know what? That sounds like a pretty cool idea. I'm going to give it a shot. Like it's one of those three things. That's it. And the second thing I'll say that you just have to be a successful entrepreneur is consistent. You just got to be consistent. You can't be flying up and down, because your organization will operate that same way and it'll be a reflection of you. And you just have to be consistent. And that's a big word that I like to use. And I've really been intentional about through the years of doing this.
Yeah. What has that looked like for you? I love that and I agree, but I'm always curious in sucking up examples around that because I think it means something to me, but I think like it's kind of interesting to hear what other people say when they or mean when they say that.
About being consistent.
Yeah, like what does it look like to be consistent in a company for you? I mean, when in your companies, what consistent things did you all do well? Or yeah,
One of the things that I consistently did across the board with my employees is I gave them a lot of um, opportunity to grow. Okay. And I will say this, if it was an aggressive mistake, I didn't care. If it
yeah,
was a lazy mistake, I gave a shit. Okay. And it was a
totally, yeah,
problem. It was a problem. So consistency for me was being the way you manage your people. Consistency for me is being there when you say you're going to be there. Okay. Consistency for me is when something doesn't go right, because it's not going to go right all the time in a business, being the first to step up and in front of it and go, you know what, made a mistake. Like there's so many examples of consistency that really just being present for your business and there when people need you, I think is the most important thing. Now you can't be especially we're talking about, you got people running $100 million businesses. That consistency is going to look a heck of a lot different if you're running a business that's making $500,000 at a dry cleaner. Okay. So, I think it really comes down to being there for your business, for your employees, being intentional every day that you can. And we're not perfect beings, so we can't always be perfect. But I always say this, it's not about perfection. It's just about progress. Like every day, trying to be consistent and making progress. So I hope that answers the question.
I love that. I know that's the way I think about it too. It's like it isn't about some people have this idea of like just working 100% every single day. I think like depending on how you define that, it's not really realistic. Like we're humans, we're flawed. We have like issues, distractions in life. We have our personal health and families to worry about. Like there's lots of things going on. It's about how do I set this, to me, it means how do I set this business up in a way that I can operate it at a high level, not perfect, but a high level consistently for 20 years. And if I can do that, meaning giving myself the balance I need, like I need to be able to take vacation. I need to be able to pick the kids up from school. I need to be able to pay myself decently. I need to be able to, have health insurance. There's like some non-negotiables here that I'm like going to build into the business to make it sustainable for 20 years. So it's not like if I just burn through another 5 years, then I'll get break even, like I don't want to run that way. Like I know people that do that and it's very hard because you just, all it takes is one slip and you've just now lost it and you're not going to hit it. So anyway, I think to me, that's what consistency really means is like building your business and your entrepreneurial vision in a way that you can do it consistently for 20 years or whatever your timeline is.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point on, they always say, well, you got your personal life and your professional life. And listen, especially when you're an entrepreneur, it intermingles. Okay, there's a lot of intermingling when it comes to that. There is no one side here, one side there, like in our videos here. It's not that way. There's a huge amount of intermingling. So you have to take care of yourself personally. And, whether that's getting in the gym in the morning, which I love to do because I know if I can knock out the hardest thing in the morning, first, then I'm be able to take on the rest of the day, but also being there for your family. There's got to be a balance. And listen, my wife she's put me in check sometimes where you're just out of balance. And she'll tell me, you're out of balance right now. And I'm like, no, all right. And I look back and I have to do a self-assessment. And she's right. It's just the ones closest to you can see that. So yeah, consistency is a big word when it comes to being and I say a professional, because it's not just your business, it's your personal life. I mean, that's being a true professional, right? And balancing it all on kids and all that stuff.
My wife just called me out this morning. She's like, "You're acting a little snappy. Are you nervous about that talk you have to give later?" I was like, "Fuck, you're right. Like I am. I like she knows me. She knows me. A and B. We've developed that level of comfort with each other to like call each other out in a in a good way, right? And it's hard though because for a lot of my life I didn't necessarily have that, and I think I would just like kind of push stuff down and pretend like, oh yeah, it's not affecting me. Like this is just work. It doesn't matter. It's like, dude, it's all pulled up together.
Yeah, it does.
So David, last question, I always ask this because we already touched on a book, but I love to get into what people are reading and pick up new ideas. Anything you've read in the last couple of years, either entrepreneurial books or not, or it could be non-business, that really affected you or kind of made an impact?
Yeah. Oh man, I got to tell you, we talked about the email, but one of the books that I would encourage all of you to read are The Law of Success in 16 Lessons by Napoleon Hill. I still pull that book out. And I mean, it's a pretty big book. Okay. It's sitting up here. I read that the first time when I was about 25 or 26 years old. And like every time I read it, I pull something else out of it. It's like I read it for the first time, but it was written, and you'll see the context when you read this book. I don't know if you've ever read it.
I've read Think and Grow Rich.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so
Very close.
I know Napoleon Hill, and yeah, it's similar, although it's shorter. Yep. Yep.
And but the big thing is that they write it in the context of like 1932, and they talk about the dollars and cents of what's going on there. Same thing, but it's a big book, and it's a fantastic book to read. A book I just read recently is The Psychology of Money.
Okay.
And it's not what you think. It's not like, hey, here's how you save money and you become rich and all that kind of stuff. But it really talked about I thought this was probably the most interesting thing that came out of this book. I mean, there was a ton of interesting stuff. Don't get me wrong, but this is what I thought was fascinating. Bernie Madoff, right? Like that guy, he obviously was a shyster, and he embezzled billions and billions of dollars from people. But do you know he had a business, a legitimate, I mean, a 100% legitimate broker business where he connected the brokers with the end users, and then he was the middleman that was making close to $50 million a year. And the lesson in this whole thing is like, when is enough enough? Like, could this guy have lived on $50 million a year, had a great life, and just done everything the right way? Yeah, but it wasn't enough. Like, he had to compare himself to this person, which then pushed him up to another level. So it's a really good book around just not only money examples like that, but also kind of the history of money and how things have evolved, and the crashes and times where things were good. So I thought it was a really good book. And then I'm just getting ready to start The 4 Disciplines of Execution.
Okay. I haven't read that. No.
Okay. All right. So that one, I believe it's Covey. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I'm going to start that book. I got it kind of sitting up there right now, and I'm getting ready to start that one.
I love it. Yeah, that money thing is that when is enough is an interesting topic that I've been more interested in. And I'm going to say this with a lot of humility. I've run tiny businesses. Like, it's not like I'm the wealthiest person in the world, but I'm more successful than I ever thought I would be if you had asked me at 18. You know what I mean? Like, it in absolute terms and in relative terms, like, I never thought I'd be here. So in a way, like, I've now gotten to this point where I can have everything that I had ever dreamed I was going to have. I was a poor kid. Like, I didn't think about this. So it's weird where even though I'm there, I still see the next hill. I still see my friends who have a slightly nicer car, the slightly bigger house, right? Like, you can't avoid it. And it's really interesting to retrospect on this and be like, if you had told me I was making how much I am and we had the life we do 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have said, great, that's it. I would be done. I'd just chill on a beach. Am I chilling on a beach? No, David. I'm sitting here trying to grow and buy more businesses. Like, I'm an idiot. But anyway, so I think it's a really important, like, The Psychology of Money, the book. I've heard some about that, and it is important to expose yourself to this, like, idea that you're not going to hit a magic number where you say, oh yeah, that's it, I'm done. Like, it's not going to happen. So learn to work around that.
Yeah, and it talks about living within your means, and it talks about putting money away from a small level, which I've been lucky enough to be able to do that through the years. And just listen, I've done some wrong things too. I mean, just it goes both ways. But I thought it was a really interesting book to pick up and just kind of familiarize yourself with it. But yeah, there's so much great stuff out there. I mean, and then podcasts, of course, like this even too, which has been a heck of a lot of fun.
Yeah. Of course. Tell us about your podcast, actually. I'll close here. David Sliman, you can look up his podcast. Give us the rundown, though, because people might want to listen.
Yeah, it's Unfinished Business. So when I originally started the podcast, because my company is Sales Proformance, I originally started the podcast a little over a year and a half ago. And it was called the Sales Proformance Podcast, where it was going to be more sales enablement, sales development. And then what happened is through the year, I kept finding myself attracted to having conversations with CEOs, business owners like yourself, Karl, who are on the show, and really hearing their stories. And there's still a sales element to it, obviously, but it's really built around personal and professional growth. And for me, if anyone can listen to that show who's either thinking about getting into business for themselves, who's in business for themselves and wants to hear another story and hear from, the people who are experts in their space, that's what the show is about. So I rebranded it Unfinished Business at the new year, and we're starting to get some legs behind it finally. Actually, it's over last week, so it's been good. So I really enjoyed doing it, and I enjoyed having you on the show.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I enjoyed having you on this one, David. So everybody go look up Unfinished Business, David Sliman. And if you are interested in having him take a look at your sales process or your team, absolutely reach out because David's a stand-up guy. Thanks so much for the time, David. We will stay in touch and hopefully do this again soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Thank you for watching this episode of Retain Trust. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up and subscribe on YouTube. It takes 2 seconds and it helps others find out about the show. And if you have questions or suggestions for a future episode, leave a comment. See you next time.